read part of the Christmas story that you'll find familiar. This is from Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 24. Now the birth of Jesus was as follows. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit. And Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man, and not wanting to disgrace her, planned to send her away secretly. When he had considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child who has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Now all this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took Mary as his wife. When we first encounter Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, when we first encounter him in the New Testament, he is going through the worst time of his life. Luke's gospel tells us that Joseph and Mary were on their way to Bethlehem to register for new taxes. Matthew tells us that he was engaged and that his fiancée was expected, and the child wasn't his. Joel Osteen would not say that Joseph was living his best life now. He was going through a tough time. Now, he was a good man, Matthew tells us, and he had no intention of embarrassing Mary publicly, but he had decided that just quietly he would call off the engagement. But before he could do that, an angel appeared to him in a dream. And the angel announced to him that the child that Mary was expecting was not that of another man, but in fact had been conceived by the Holy Spirit. And Joseph was told to go ahead with the wedding just as he had planned. And then the angel, at a time when Joseph really needed to hear some good news, the angel announced the greatest news of all to Joseph. And that is that this baby that his wife would deliver would be Emmanuel, God with us. Now, the angel's announcement was the fulfillment of a prophecy that had been given over 700 years before that time. It was a prophecy given by the prophet Isaiah. Here's the prophecy. It's in Isaiah chapter 7. The Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. That's from the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah was written in one of the darkest periods of Israel's history. Israel had just lost a war to their archenemy, the Assyrians. Assyria was the most powerful nation on earth at the time, and they had fought with the Israelites and had just crushed them. And not only had they defeated them in battle, they took most of the healthy, able-bodied men and carried them off as slaves, carried them back to Assyria to do forced labor. This is a time of great darkness, discouragement, defeat in the time of Israel. A time when they were without hope. And in the midst of that darkness, one of their prophets, a prophet named Isaiah, he receives a word from the Lord. And it's recorded in Isaiah chapter 9. And it begins with one of the most hopeful, glorious words in any language. And it's the word, nevertheless. Isn't that a great word? At a time when Israel was utterly defeated and without hope, when darkness was across the land, the prophecy that God sends by way of Isaiah begins with the word nevertheless. And here it is, it's in Isaiah chapter 9. Nevertheless, the darkness shall not last forever. The people that walked in darkness shall see a great light, and they that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them the light shall shine. For unto us a child is born, and unto us a son is given, and the government shall rest upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Now for us today, that prophecy is 3,000 years old almost, but it is still the old story of Christmas. And it's the story that we must never forget every year when Christmas rolls around, that the true meaning of Christmas is in that little phrase, Emmanuel, God with us. Now the notion of God being with us is not new. It wasn't, biblically I mean, in the Old Testament, God visited his people often enough that the Hebrews even had a word for it. The Hebrew word Shekinah, which means dwelling, that they called it the Shekinah glory of God. You know, God's glory is when God is seen as he truly is. And so they had a word or a phrase, the Shekinah glory of God, meaning that sometimes God would show up in mystical ways, but you could see him, if only for a fleeting moment. For example, God was with us when he spoke through the burning bush, when he spoke to Moses in the desert near Mount Horeb. God was with us in the thunder and lightning on Mount Sinai when he gave the 10 Commandments to the nation of Israel. He was with us in the pillar of fire by night and the cloud during the day that guided the nation of Israel in the wilderness. He was with the children of Israel when he parted the Red Sea as Pharaoh's army closed in. He was with Daniel in the lion's den when Daniel was cast there by a wicked king. God was with David, just a young boy, the future king of Israel, when he stood before a mighty giant named Goliath. And he was with the 3 Hebrew children in the fiery furnace when, instead of taking them out of the furnace, he got in there with them. So yes, there were those fleeting moments when God would appear, if only for a moment, but as a reminder that he was with us. But in Jesus, God was with us each moment, in the here and now, bone of our bone, flesh of our flesh. He even told his followers before he left the earth that he would be with them to the ends of the world, and that he would do it by sending his Spirit, whose name was Comforter. And in the original language, it's even more graphic. His name is the one whose calling is to be at our sides. And that's what we need, isn't it? We need a God who is here with us, not just waiting for us in heaven, but a God who is with us in the here and now. A God who is real to us when all hope seems gone, when our dreams have been crushed and the weight of the world comes down on our shoulders. If God is just a God of heaven, he's of no use to us in this life. But if he is Emmanuel, God with us, we don't have to wait to get to heaven to find God, because God has already found us in the here and now. He's here with us in our trials and sorrows in this life. He is God with us in the cancer ward. He's God with us in the Alzheimer's unit at the nursing home. He's God with us when the pink slip comes and you lose your job. He's God with us when your bills are bigger than your bank account. He's God with us when all hope seems gone, and when your heart is so broken you feel like you can't go on. Christmas is a reminder that God is with us. Think of it. The eternal God with us in our little moment. The all-knowing God with us in our ignorance. The all-powerful God with us in our weakness. with us in the here and now, not as unknowable and distant, but flesh and blood like us. There was a Christmas play. It was written by a German minister named Gunther Rutenborn. It was written in 1945, just after the end of World War II. People of Germany at the time were in a daze, trying to figure out what had happened and how it had happened. And so in this play, a group of Germans have gathered in a town hall, and they're discussing what happened, and they specifically want to know who is to blame for this. In the play, they give the answers that were popular among the German people at the time. Some said, well, Hitler is to blame. He's the one who did all this. Others said, no, it was the rich financiers who financed Hitler. They're to blame. And others said, no, we the German people, it's our apathy that is to blame. And finally, one voice from the back of the room shouts out, you want to know who's to blame? I'll tell you who's to blame. God is to blame, because he is the one who allowed all this to happen. And with one voice, the people begin to agree with him, and they say, that's right, God is to blame for all of this. And so in the play, God is put on trial for the crime of creation. And at the end of the trial, he is found guilty. And the judge says, this crime is so horrible that I must hand down the strongest possible sentence. I hereby sentence God to live on this earth as a human being. The three angels are given the task of announcing the sentence. The first angel walks to the end of the stage and says, I'm going to see to it that when God serves his sentence, he knows what it's like to be obscure and powerless and poor. He will be born on the backside of nowhere with a peasant girl for his mother. And there will be suspicion and shame about his birth. The second angel says, I'm going to see to it that when God serves his sentence, he knows what it's like to be disappointed and rejected. He will have to live as a Jew in a Jew-hating world. No one will ever understand him or comprehend what he is trying to do. The third angel says, I'm going to see to it that when God serves his sentence, he knows what it's like to suffer. I'm going to see to it that he endures agonizing physical pain. And at the end of his life, he will be executed in the most painful way possible. And with that, the three angels exit the stage and the house lights go down. And it begins to dawn on the audience that God has already served that sentence. He knows what it's like to live as a human being. He knows what it's like to be obscure and powerless and poor. He knows what it is to be disappointed and rejected. He knows what it is to suffer physical pain and to be abandoned by those closest to him. And that means that there is nothing that you face today that God does not understand firsthand, because he lived it. Jesus, Emmanuel, lived among us. And he shared our trials, and he experienced life as a human being just like us. He enjoyed none of the privileges of rank or social status that he could have enjoyed. He worked with his hands just like we do. He knew what it was to be mistreated, to feel that life was unfair, as we hear him crying out, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. He knew what it was to suffer and to experience a painful, humiliating death on the cross. Emmanuel, God with us, knew and experienced all of that. And so this Christmas season, I want to leave you with this thought. Every time you hear a Christmas carol, every time you see a Christmas tree, every time you open a Christmas card, I want you to let it be a reminder to you that God is with us. And you will call his name Emmanuel.